healthcare?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. College Democrats, Republicans. Thank the College Avenue Council for hosting this debate. Yes, I do think healthcare reform should have a public option. Now, the public option that's there in both the House and the Senate bill basically creates an insurance exchange program which basically competes with private insurers to bring down costs. Now, why I say compete is because some of the insurance companies, especially in the South, have close to 80 to 90% of the market completely monopolized. So there's no antitrust laws against them, there's no consumer protection. The way I think about healthcare is just like if you want protection against fraud, protection against theft, that's the government job to do it. This is also a form of consumer protection. We have to protect against the extremities of a monopoly industry, like the insurance industry. So, and I think having a national exchange pool where you can have consumer protection, like mandating coverage like mammograms, colonoscopies, and making sure that they don't discriminate against pre-existing conditions. So if you have cancer, you just can't be blocked off. They can't cap the amount of visits you make to the hospital. So I think it's important to have a plan where you have both consumer protection and you have subsidies to people who can't afford health insurance. I think we can all agree that if you have a healthier nation, you have a more productive nation. So I think that's very important. And by every standard, the CBO projection, the Congressional Budget Office has said that this would reduce deficit. There's an MIT study that says that premiums, those who buy into the public plan, will go down compared to they would buy from just the market as it is, unreformed. So I think all the studies and all the amendments in the bill, both in the Senate and the House, point towards a good bill that will bring down costs, bring down the deficit, and I think that we can work with that for now.
By the way, if you do start to get towards the end of your time, I'll give you a 10-second warning. I'll just say 10 seconds so that you know so you don't get stuck in the middle of a sentence. So.
I probably won't go more than 30 seconds, but no. So I think brought up a good point in talking about the public option and all its benefits. But the inherent problem that I see within the public option is this idea that the public option will actually turn into a single-payer system, and saying that the government will essentially start to put all of their premiums and essentially take all of the insurance companies and tell them that they need to provide this particular service of care, this high-level service of care, and inherently the government tends to always give each particular insurance company or health or hospital less in that particular sense, in which the brunt of the cost would actually be put onto the private insurance companies, in which they would have to hold over that kind of burden, in which, because the public option would be much more viable in that particular sense, it's going to shift into a single-payer system in which the cost of the actual program will actually be much more in the long run, because each private insurance company will be phased out because it's going to be too expensive to actually compete in the private market. So I think that what we should do as a solution to this problem is to actually open up markets within the actual states themselves. I think if you have a health insurance company health insurance companies in New Jersey should not just be confined to just New Jersey. I think that people should have the option to go into different states. So if you wanted a health insurance buy health insurance from a company in the state of Alaska, I think that should be a viable option to people if they definitely do want it. And in saying so, I think people who are under the programs of Medicare and Medicaid should be given vouchers. I think that if they are people who are underprivileged, and even if you're going to implement a policy where where you want the underprivileged to have a sort of system of health care, I think that by providing them with vouchers, it gives them that ability of choice and would actually bring down costs in the long run.
So the question was, do I want a public option in the healthcare bill? No, I do not. Am I worried that it's going to raise costs dramatically? I am. And how else would I expect to achieve universal health care? Well, I think that that's the wrong way of looking at it. That we shouldn't be going into this trying to cover everybody. We should allow people the choice of getting health insurance themselves individually. And that's what we need. We need a system where individuals purchase their own insurance. Now, to going with the public option specifically, I think that under the public option, you were talking about the costs were going down, and that's actually not the case. The CBO, Congressional Budget Office, has been talking about how the costs will go up. And the only way that you can expect to cover 30 million plus people who are Americans who are uninsured. And to do that, obviously you have to have deficit spending. And there's nothing inherently in the public option that's going to lower costs. The only thing that can lower costs is by giving people more choice and by opening up supply. And what Brian was talking about was allowing states to compete with each other, so that way they could, so individuals in New Jersey can buy from Alaska and vice versa. It'll increase supply. Some other ideas are tax incentives. That right now, individuals who purchase insurance on their own are taxed, whereas employers who give their employees health insurance are not taxed, and they're given a tax credit, I guess you could say. And we need to reverse that and allow individuals to purchase their own health insurance tax-free. So another thing that you were talking about, the Democrat was talking about, was the antitrust and the kind of like the health insurance have a monopoly, so to speak, on the system. Well, if you want to talk about monopoly, the ultimate monopoly is the government. And if the government gets its hands on anything, it's not going to let go. It's going to keep squeezing and squeezing and squeezing until it squeezes the competitive life out of the entire system. So I think we need to actually lower the cost by increasing individual choice.
All right, thank you. Next question. Oh,
We don't have a rebuttal?
no, the rebuttal will come at the end of the section, so you can speak about anything.
Okay.
So the second question is, has the so-called stimulus bill actually stimulated the economy, or has it been a waste of $787 billion?
So I think that the stimulus bill has actually not stimulated the economy in any kind of way. And even if it has, I think it has a minimal impact on the broader scheme of the actual financial crisis. I think that the stimulus bill, what was inherent flaw within it particularly, is that it gave all of its funding to these higher up companies that essentially are still failing despite the aid that they needed. And I forget the statistic on it, but the majority of the economy in America is driven by small businesses. And I think that if you're going to give this stimulus bill, it should have been given to individual Americans, or it should have been given to individual small companies so that the economy can get going in that particular way. I think that in the actual with the way that the stimulus bill was actually given to the larger companies, I don't think actually had an effective effect on the actual scheme of the economy, because it just didn't, because the larger companies are still essentially failing because of the stimulus bill. But I think also on a philosophical level, I think if you allow these companies to continue to get these stimulus bills, and you allow them to have this sort of bailout, you create this situation where somewhere down the line, 10 years, 15, 20 years down the road, we're going to be in the same situation. Because if people don't realize that they have to be responsible for their own actions, or companies realize that they don't have to be responsible for their own actions, they're going to be maximizing their profits. They're not going to be actual prudent in their sort of ventures that they engage in the long term, because they know that the government will actually just bail them out in the end.
So I would lean towards the complete waste of $787 billion. When the Congress and the President were talking about it, trying to pass it through the Congress and sign it, they were talking about how if it's passed, the unemployment rate won't go past 8%. Well, now it's at 10%. Millions of jobs have been lost since that bill was signed. So whether the question is, has it created jobs, which was its original stated intent of the policymakers, it has failed. And you have this idea thrown out, jobs created or saved. That's a completely mind-numbingly stupid argument, because every single day, every single month, jobs are created, jobs are lost. The whole point is to try to create more jobs than you lose. And we have been losing more jobs than we've been saving. So the stimulus bill has failed in that regard. Furthermore, we were told about shovel-ready projects. There are no shovel-ready projects. Obama himself even admitted that was a fraudulent idea, that people can just go in and start working on these projects right away. It's not true. And that we have these numbers coming out that such a small percent of the stimulus bill has actually been spent so far. So in that regard, it's a little too soon to judge it, but that's part of the actual stimulus bill, that it's taking such a slow time to actually work. My last point would be that the deficit. that it has exploded the deficit to such a large point where in a few years we're going to have